I'm Audrey. I'm 30 years old, and nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I saw that day at the family reunion. You know how people say family gatherings bring out the best and worst in everyone? Well, I saw the worst. And it didn't just hurt me, it hurt my daughter, Lily, who was only 6 years old at the time. We were at my parents' lake house, a big old place they like to brag about. Cedar siding, a fancy dock out back, the whole old money vibe. It was supposed to be a fun weekend, you know. One of those reunions where everyone acts polite on the surface, but there's tension humming underneath every smile. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for watching my own brother, Derek, slap my daughter across the face. The sound of his hand against her cheek still echoes in my mind, and you know what made it worse? The sound that came after my father, Howard, smirking and saying, well, she needed to learn some shame. Like he was proud of Derek for disciplining my kid. My mother, Eleanor, actually laughed. They all thought they were safe in their cruelty. They didn't realize a family documentary mic was recording every single word. Before I tell you how I turned Derek's perfect life into a living nightmare, do me a favor. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe, if you believe kids deserve protection, even from their own family. Let's back up for a second. To really understand what happened, you have to know the house I grew up in. The Thompson household looked picture perfect from the outside. My dad, Howard, corporate attorney, the kind who wore expensive suits and acted like he owned every room he walked into. My mom, Eleanor, beautiful, poised, always the perfect hostess. Then there was Derek, the golden boy, athletic, strata student, dad's mini-me. And then there was me, the scapegoat, the one who never measured up, the one they blamed when anything went wrong. The family roles were set before I even knew how to spell my name. Derek learned early how to mimic our dad's aggression. That's what got him praise. Me, I was more curious, more sensitive. I asked questions. I challenged the double standards. And for that, I was labeled the troublemaker. Why? Can't you be more like your brother? That was my father's favorite line. If I got a B on a test, it was, you're lazy. If Derek got a B, it was, he must be tired from football practice, what a hard worker. The rules were never the same for both of us. My mom wasn't much better. She'd tell the neighbors and family friends that I just didn't know how to behave. I can still hear her voice, sweet as poison. Audrey just doesn't understand her place. But Derek is such a blessing. By the time I turned 16, I developed this protective shell around myself. I learned how to go unnoticed. I counted down the days until I could leave for college and never look back. And then I met Jason. I was 18, wide-eyed, and desperate for a fresh start. Jason was older, kind, and attentive. He made me feel seen in a way my family never had. We got married when I was 20, way too young, but I was convinced I'd finally found my safe place. My parents, of course, showed up to the wedding with their tight, disapproving smiles. My father complained about the venue. My mother whispered about how my dress looked cheap. And Derek gave a speech that still makes my skin crawl. I never thought my little sister would find someone willing to take her on, he said, raising his glass while everyone did this awkward laugh. Jason squeezed my hand under the table, but inside, I was dying a little. Still, for a while, things felt okay. Jason and I had our tiny apartment. I worked part-time while finishing my degree in communications. When I got pregnant with Lily, it felt like the universe was giving me a do-over. Lily was born on a rainy Tuesday, -7 pounds, 3 ounces of pure magic. She had Jason's bright blue eyes and my dark hair. Holding her, I promised she'd always know she was enough. She'd never feel the shame my family had drilled into me, but you know, life has a way of throwing curveballs. By the time Lily was 3, the cracks in my marriage had started to show. Jason began working late, coming home smelling like expensive cologne I didn't own. One night, I found texts from someone named Kara. He swore it was nothing. Then he admitted it was an affair? 6 months, he said. We tried therapy, but he'd already checked out. When Lily turned 4, I found myself a divorced, single mom. The worst part, I couldn't even tell my family the truth. I knew how they'd spin it somehow. Jason's cheating would be my fault, and I was right. The day I called my mom to tell her the marriage was over, she sighed dramatically and said, "Men don't leave happy homes. Audrey, what did you do to push him away?" Single motherhood was a whole new battlefield. My job at Madison Marketing barely covered rent and daycare. There were months when an unexpected car repair or a medical bill made my stomach tie in knots, and every time I had to ask my parents for help, they made sure I knew what a disappointment I was. Derek, meanwhile, was living his best life. Vice president at some big financial firm, married to Natalie, a pediatrician from an old family, no kids, they were focusing on their careers. My parents worshipped him for that. If only you'd applied yourself like your brother, my father would say every time I visited, you could have had something to show for yourself. And here's the thing, despite all of that, I still wanted Lily to know her grandparents. I told myself that even toxic families can have redeeming moments. So when my parents invited us to the annual reunion at the lake house, I actually said yes. It had been 3 years since I'd stepped foot in that house. My best friend Tara practically begged me not to go. These people have never had your back, she said. Why would you put Lily through that? Because they're still family, I said, trying to convince myself more than her. And Lily loves the lake. So we went. Lily was over the moon. 6 years old, hair in pigtails, already talking about how she'd swim every day and sing for everyone. She loved to sing, she'd belt out songs from her favorite cartoons at the top of her lungs. And she was good. I envied how confident she was. She didn't know yet that our family hated anyone who took up too much space as we pulled into the circular driveway behind Derek's shiny BMW and my parents' silver Mercedes. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. I plastered on a smile. For Lily's sake, we're here, I said. She bounced in her seat. Can I swim right away? Let's say hi to everyone first, okay? Then we'll see. The front door swung open before we even made it up the steps. My mother stood there, arms crossed over her perfectly pressed linen blouse, her smile so tight it might crack. Her hair was perfectly styled, every highlight in place. She looked exactly like the woman who used to stand at the top of the stairs when I came home past curfew, tapping her foot like I was the greatest disappointment on earth. There you are, she said, her eyes flicking over me, assessing every detail, my hair, my outfit, probably the circles under my eyes. Her gaze landed on Lily and finally softened, if only a fraction. We were beginning to think you'd changed your mind. Traffic was heavy, I said, forcing a polite smile as I hugged her stiffly. It's good to see you, Mom. Inside, the great room looked exactly the same. Massive stone fireplace, antique furniture, family portraits lined up like trophies. The air smelled like polished wood and the catered food my mom always ordered instead of cooking herself. I spotted my father, Howard, standing by the fireplace with my Uncle Robert. Deep in conversation about the stock market, no doubt, he looked up when I walked in, not to greet me, but more like to register that I'd arrived, then went right back to his chat. That was my dad, always more interested in money than people. Derek made his entrance from the kitchen, like he always did, perfectly timed to get everyone's attention. He was wearing a crisp polo shirt, designer watch glinting on his wrist. His wife, Natalie, walked behind him, her smile soft and genuine, one of the few warm faces in the house. Derek draped an arm over her shoulder like she was an accessory. Well, the prodigal sister returns, he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. He looked down at Lily, who peeked out from behind my leg. And little Miss Lily, you've grown. What are you now, 5? 6, Lily said shyly, pressing herself closer to me. 6. A big girl, Derek said, the corner of his mouth twitching up in that fake smile that never reached his eyes. Natalie stepped forward, pulling me into a gentle hug that actually felt real. It's good to see you, Audrey. And you too, Lily. Your cousins are down by the dock if you want to join them later. Lily's eyes lit up. Can I go? Mom, please. Let's settle in first. Okay, then we'll find them. I turned to see Derek watching me like a cat toying with a mouse. He took a slow sip of his bourbon. Still working at that little marketing place. What is it again? Assistant to someone important? I bit my tongue. Administrative assistant. And I actually got a promotion last month. I manage a small team now. How nice for you, he said, that smirk never leaving his face. I just closed a 7-figure deal with Anderson Tech. Did I mention the bonus? Dad, did I tell you about the bonus? My father clapped Derek on the back like he'd just won a gold medal. That's my boy. Always closing deals. Always aiming higher. I spotted my brother-in-law Paul, over by the windows, fiddling with camera equipment. He gave me a sympathetic look. He'd married my father's sister, Linda, so he knew exactly what the Thompson reunions were like. He was the black sheep of his branch, just like me. Documentary still on? I asked, lowering my voice. Paul nodded, checking the mic levels. Your dad wants everything on tape. Derek's big plans for the family legacy, the perfect Thompson family, captured for posterity. I raised an eyebrow. He knows real life doesn't edit itself, right? Paul gave a dry laugh. I've got wireless mics set up around the main areas. Authentic family interactions, that's what your dad asked for. I almost laughed out loud at the irony. Authentic family interactions. Careful what you wish for, Dad. Our room was the smallest in the house. Tucked away at the end of the hallway with a view of the neighbor's fence instead of the lake. That was fine, I didn't come here for the view. I unpacked while Lily danced around, chattering about swimming and how she was going to sing her new song for everyone. She'd been practicing for days. She loved that song, something about friendship and adventures. It was pure Lily Bright, fearless, too loud for people like Derek. Can I wear my swimsuit now? She asked, bouncing on the bed. Let's finish unpacking first, I said, smoothing her hair. And maybe wait until the sun's not so strong. Dinner that night was everything I expected it to be, which is to say, awful. My dad dominated the table conversation, grilling Derek about his investment strategies, like he was the second coming of Warren Buffett. My mother nitpicked everything about me. My hair was too long. My job was too small. Lily was too loud, too energetic, needed more structure. She said it like structure was a magical cure for a 6-year-old's joy. Meanwhile, the kids' table was a battleground. Lily's cousins, Derek's nieces and nephews from Natalie's side corrected her when she mispronounced words, rolled their eyes when she got excited, and whispered to each other behind their hands. It was the Thompson family dynamic in miniature cruelty with a polite smile. After dinner, while I was helping clear dishes, my Aunt Linda cornered me near the kitchen. Audrey, I heard about the divorce. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Thanks, Aunt Linda. Derek mentioned you've been struggling. You know, there's an opening in our company mailroom if you're interested. I forced a tight smile. I appreciate the offer. But I'm up for another promotion at Madison. I'm actually leading a small project now. She patted my arm like I was a clueless child. Sometimes we have to be realistic about our capabilities, dear. That night, I tucked Lily into bed, and I could see the day weighing on her. Everything okay, sweetie? I asked. She traced little circles on her blanket, her voice barely a whisper. Cousin Emma said my singing is annoying. And Uncle Derek said girls shouldn't be so loud. My chest tightened. There it was, the same script I'd grown up hearing. Hey, look at me, I said gently. Your voice is beautiful, Lily. You can sing anytime you want. But Grandpa said you were too loud when you were little, too. He said that's why you always got in trouble. I felt anger crawl up my spine, but I kept my voice calm. Sometimes grown-ups are wrong, even grandpas. You know what, especially your grandpa. He doesn't get to decide what's too loud. She giggled a little, but it was weak. I kissed her forehead. Tomorrow will be better. We'll swim. We'll sing just you and me. But lying awake that night, listening to muffled laughter downstairs, I felt that old fear creeping in. I'd made a mistake bringing Lily here. Some places are poison. No matter how much you want to believe they've changed. I had promised to protect her. But how do you protect a child when you've walked her right back into the lion's den? Morning at the lake house started with sunshine pouring through thin curtains that didn't block out much. I'd slept maybe 3 hours. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Derek's smug grin, my father's cold approval, and Lily's tiny shoulders shrinking under their weight. But when I rolled over, there she was, my girl, sitting cross-legged on the floor, humming to herself while arranging her dolls for an imaginary tea party. She looked up at me with those bright blue eyes that never stayed sad for long. Mom, wake up. Uncle Paul said they're making a special breakfast in the big room. Can we go? I forced a smile. Of course, baby, let me get dressed. Then waffles. Okay, she beamed. That's the thing about kids, they bounce back fast, or they look like they do. What you don't see is how the hurt settles in the corners of their hearts, how it makes them doubt themselves later. I'd lived it. I'd be damned if Lily lived it too. When we got downstairs, the great room, the big room, as Lily called it, was already buzzing. My father sat at the head of the giant oak table, the king at his throne, newspaper spread wide like a wall between him and everyone else. My mother hovered around the catering staff, pointing out flaws in the fruit platter like it mattered. Derek and Natalie were off to the side with my father, deep in a conversation that looked serious, probably about stocks or another deal he'd brag about over cocktails later. Lily's eyes darted to the kids' table by the big bay window. Her cousins were there, giggling over juice boxes and pancakes. She hesitated, glancing at me for permission. "Go ahead," I said, giving her shoulder a squeeze. "Go sit with them, honey." I poured myself a coffee and sank into a chair near my Aunt Linda, trying to look invisible while the family circus played out. Every now and then, I caught Paul behind his camera, adjusting mics along the ceiling beams. The little wireless ones discreet, but they caught everything. For once, I was glad for my father's obsession with looking good on tape. At first, everything seemed fine. The kids were giggling. The grown-ups were toasting with mimosas at 8:30 in the morning because that's the Thompson family's idea of bonding. I kept an eye on Lily. She was doing her best, showing her cousins a new coloring book, humming a tune under her breath, trying to squeeze into their games the way only an eager 6-year-old can. But they ignored her, or worse, they shut her down with eye rolls and whispers. It was like watching history repeat itself right in front of me. I'd been that kid once, the too loud too much girl who got told to hush more times than she could count. At some point, Lily's humming turned into singing. Just soft at first, her favorite cartoon song about adventures and friendship. Her voice floated through the big room, sweet and clear. I saw a few heads turn. Natalie smiled at her, but Derek's jaw tensed. He shot me a look across the room, the kind of look that says, "Control your child." I pretended not to see him. What was I supposed to do? Shush my daughter for being happy? For having a voice? I'd be damned. My mother leaned over from her perch by the pastries. "Audrey," she said loudly, her voice cutting through the chatter. "Don't you think Lily is being a bit disruptive? The adults are trying to have a conversation." Opened my mouth to answer to tell her that my kid wasn't doing anything wrong, but before I could, Lily's voice rose into the big chorus. Bright and joyful, filling every corner of that cold, polished room. "For God's sake, Derek," muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "can't you control your child for 5 minutes?" My cheeks flushed. I pushed back my chair, ready to walk over and gently tell Lily to sing later, not because she was wrong, but because I could feel the tension thickening in the air. But my Aunt Linda grabbed my wrist with some inane question about the marketing industry, just enough of a distraction to cost me seconds. Seconds that changed everything. Derek slammed his glass down on the table. The clink echoed through the great room, making everyone go quiet. He pushed his chair back so hard it scraped the floor, that nails and chalkboard screech. Then he stood, big and broad, and so sure of himself, and strode across the room, toward Lily. "Derek," I called, but he ignored me. Lily looked up from her coloring book, smiling, expecting praise. That innocent look on her face, it still guts me. She didn't even flinch when he raised his hand. Then the slap. It was so loud it sounded like someone had popped a balloon. Lily's tiny body jerked backward. Her crayon skittered across the table. The imprint of Derek's hand bloomed red across her cheek almost instantly. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out for a moment. Just those big blue eyes, wide with shock and betrayal. The room froze. Everyone frozen except for my father, who folded his newspaper like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. He looked at Derek, nodded approvingly, and said, "Well, she needed to learn some shame." Then, like some punchline in a sick joke, my mother's laugh rang out, light and sweet. "Audrey never did learn how to teach a child to behave," she said to no one and everyone. I don't even remember standing up. One moment I was behind my chair, the next I was at Lily's side. She was crying now, her whole body shaking with those raw, silent sobs kids make when they're too shocked to breathe. I wrapped my arms around her, pressing her face against my shoulder so she didn't have to see them. My brother's crossed arms, the smirk on my father's face, my mother's cold amusement. "What is wrong with you?" I hissed at Derek. "She's 6 years old, Derek. 6. He didn't even blink. She's old enough to learn the world doesn't revolve around her noise," he said, his tone so casual, like we were talking about the weather. "Maybe if someone had taught you that lesson, you wouldn't be a divorced secretary raising a brat." I should have punched him. Maybe in another life I would have. Instead, my voice shook with rage. "Administrative assistant," I shot back. The absurdity of correcting him in that moment. It's what trauma does. And she's not a brat, she's a child, who was singing. My father snapped his newspaper open again. "Audrey, you're overreacting as usual. A little discipline never hurt anyone." Look how well Derek turned out. I laughed, one of those broken, incredulous laughs you can't stop once it starts. Yeah. Look how well he turned out. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Paul, my uncle, by marriage, the black sheep, standing stock-still by his camera gear. His face was pale, and for a second I didn't understand why. Then it hit me. The mics were still on. The documentary mics had picked up everything. The slap, the insult, the shame, all of it. I saw Derek's eyes flick to the camera. He knew too, but it was too late. I pressed Lily's damp cheek against my shoulder, and whispered, "Nobody touches you again, baby. Nobody." Then I glared at all of them. We're done here. I don't even remember half walking, half carrying Lily up those polished stairs. All I know is her tiny arms were clinging to my neck so tight it hurt, and every step felt like dragging a piece of myself away from a battlefield I should have left years ago. Downstairs, I could hear my mother's voice, sharp and dismissive as ever. It was hardly a tap. "Audrey's making a scene again." I heard my father agreeing, like the old record he always was. And Derek's voice low, cold, saying something about me being unstable. How predictable. I got Lily into our tiny room at the end of the hallway and closed the door with my foot. She was still crying, quiet hiccups that tore at me. Her cheek was already puffing up, a pink red mark that screamed he did this. It was all I could see. I wanted to run back downstairs and claw Derek's eyes out. But that wouldn't help. Lily. Right now, she needed me calm. I took a washcloth to the sink, ran it under cold water, and pressed it gently to her cheek. "I know it's cold. Baby, it'll help." Her eyes wide, wet, still so trusting, met mine. "Mommy, was I bad?" she whispered. That question, 4 words, undid me more than the slap ever could have. Because that's what they do. They make you believe you deserve it? I dropped the washcloth and gathered her clothes, breathing in her shampoo and tears. No, Lily, you weren't bad. You were singing. You were happy. You were perfect. Uncle Derek was wrong. He was so wrong. She nodded but didn't look convinced. How could she? She'd seen a room full of adults back Derek up. Even if they didn't say it, they'd sat there and let it happen. There was a soft knock at the door. I stiffened, ready to throw whoever it was down the stairs. "It's Paul," came a quiet voice. "Can I talk to you?" I cracked the door open an inch. Paul's face was pale, like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. He glanced at Lily, then back at me. "Audrey, I got everything." The slap, Derek's comments, your father. All of it. The mic picked it up clear as day. I held my breath. Proof. Actual, undeniable proof. "Before they realize, I can pull a copy for you. Put it on a USB drive. Just in case." He lowered his voice even more. "You know how your dad is about controlling what people see." For the first time since the slap, my brain felt like it clicked back on. "Can you do it tonight?" Paul nodded. "I'll download it now. Meet me by my car in 20 minutes. Don't tell anyone." I thanked him, and he slipped back down the hallway. I could hear my family arguing downstairs, muffled, but sharp enough to know they'd started rewriting the story already. They always did. When I turned back, Lily had curled up on the bed, hugging her stuffed bunny. Her eyelids were heavy. Trauma is exhausting, especially when you're 6. I brushed her hair back and whispered, "We're leaving tonight." "Okay, we're going somewhere safe." "Are we in trouble?" she murmured, double quotes. "No, baby," I said, my voice trembling. "We're going to be just fine." As soon as she drifted off, I grabbed my phone and called Tara. She answered on the second ring, her voice half asleep. "Hey, how's the reunion?" "Derek hit Lily," I said, straight out, because sugarcoating it made me feel sick. "He slapped her across the face." My parents laughed. Tara's breath hissed through the phone. "He what? Are you kidding me? Audrey, tell me you're gone already." "Packing now," I said, zipping up the suitcase with one hand. "Can we stay with you for a few days? Are you serious?" "My door's already open. Get out of there. Now." I felt my eyes sting, not because I was sad, but because I'd forgotten what real family sounded like. No questions, no excuses. Just love. 20 minutes later, with our bags packed, I peeked into the hallway. No one was around. I scooped Lily into my arms, still half asleep, bunny dangling, and made my way down the stairs as quietly as possible. Of course, I wasn't that lucky. My mother was waiting in the foyer, arms crossed, mouth pinched. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded, voice dripping with disdain. "Home," I said, shifting Lily on my hip. Or did you expect us to stay after your precious son assaulted my daughter? Oh, stop being dramatic, she scoffed. It was hardly a slap. You're embarrassing yourself. I tilted Lily just enough so she could see the red handprint on her cheek. A tap doesn't do this. For the briefest moment, my mother's eyes flickered. Guilt, doubt, maybe, but then her face hardened again. Children bruise easily, you know that. You always were fragile, Audrey. I almost laughed. Is that the story now? That Lily bruises too easily? You should be ashamed. She opened her mouth to snap back, but my father's voice came from behind her. Audrey, if you walk out that door, don't expect any more help from us. Don't come begging when you can't pay rent. Don't expect us to bail you out again. There it was, the leash they'd kept around my neck for years. The money, the power. They never gave help without owning you for it. I met his eyes, steady for once in my life. Keep your money, I said. It's not worth this. Derek appeared in the hallway, drink in hand like he hadn't just hit a child. Running away again, little sister. Can't face the consequences of raising a brat. I looked right at him. Enjoy what's coming, Derek. And that's when he knew. He knew I had something. His eyes flicked to the camera bag Paul always carried. His smirk slipped, just a crack. But it was enough. I turned and pushed through the front door, the cool night air hitting my face like freedom. Paul was waiting by his car, just like he said. He handed me a tiny USB drive. No words, just a nod. I nodded back, our silent agreement sealed in that little piece of plastic and metal. As I buckled Lily into her booster seat, she stirred awake. Where are we going, Mommy? Somewhere safe, I said, kissing her forehead. Somewhere we can sing as loud as we want. She gave me a sleepy smile, and in that moment, tired, scared, angry, I knew exactly what I had to do. Derek and my parents had spent a lifetime teaching me shame. But they'd forgotten the one thing that matters most. Some people aren't afraid to break the cycle, even if it means burning the family legacy to the ground. The drive to Tara's apartment felt like a blur. Headlights, highway lines, the hum of Lily's soft breathing in the back seat. Every so often, she'd shift and wince when her cheek brushed the car seat strap. Every time, rage burned hotter in my chest. It was like there was no air in the car, just the heavy truth that my own family had done this. When we finally pulled into Tara's lot, she was already outside waiting in her slippers and a giant hoodie. She'd left her porch light on, her arms crossed over her chest like a fortress and a welcome sign all at once. She took one look at Lily's swollen cheek and sucked in her breath. Oh honey, she whispered, brushing a strand of hair back from Lily's forehead as I carried her up the stairs. Come on. I made up the guest room. Stay as long as you need. We laid Lily down in the spare bed, a soft, warm cocoon of mismatched blankets that smelled like lavender and laundry soap. She was out in seconds, clutching her stuffed bunny. I just stood there, staring at her, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. This little girl, my heart, walking around outside my body, had trusted me to keep her safe. And I'd walked her right back into the fire. Tara squeezed my arm. Hey, this is not your fault. I didn't answer. I just dug in my bag and pulled out the USB drive Paul had given me. I could feel its weight like a grenade in my pocket. We moved to the kitchen table, trying to keep our voices low. Tara poured me tea, but I didn't touch it. I just stared at that small piece of plastic. Proof. Something I'd never had growing up, because when you grow up in a house like mine, it's always your word against theirs. And they always win. Tara popped her laptop open and plugged it in. Are you sure you want to hear this again? She asked. I nodded. I needed to. I needed to know exactly what they'd done, how they'd laughed at a crying child, how they'd called it shame, discipline. The audio crackled. Then Derek's voice filled the tiny kitchen. The slap, you could actually hear it. Lily's small gasp. My father's smug approval. My mother's tinkling laugh, as though my daughter's pain was entertainment. I gripped my mug so hard my knuckles went white. Tara's eyes glistened. Jesus, Audrey. They're monsters. They're my family, I said. It sounded ridiculous the moment it left my lips. No, Tara snapped, not even pretending to soften it. They're not anymore. She was right. Blood doesn't make people family, not if they think it gives them a license to break. I stayed up most of the night planning. Not pacing in circles like I'd done after Jason's affair. No, this was different. This time, there was nothing left to lose. I wasn't fighting for a marriage or an apology. I was fighting for Lily to know her worth. In the morning, I made 2 calls. First to Lily's pediatrician, Dr. Winters. I told her what happened, every raw, ugly detail. She asked us to come in immediately. Dr. Winters was gentle but firm. She documented the mark on Lily's cheek, checked her for other injuries, and then looked me dead in the eye. I'm making a note in her file. If you decide to press charges, this will matter. And I'm referring you to a child psychologist. She's going to need help processing this. Next, I called my old college friend Lisa, a lawyer now, the kind who lived for underdogs. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but when I explained, she didn't hesitate. Send me the recording, Lisa said. Do you want to sue? I don't want money, I said. And I meant it. I want accountability. Lisa paused. Well, what your brother did is definitely assault on a minor. It might not stick criminally, your parents would spin it as discipline, but his work, his charity board, his mentorship programs, they will care, especially with that recording. And that's when the idea sparked. Derek wasn't just my bully anymore, he was a golden boy on paper, vice president at Meridian Financial, board member for a children's charity, mentor for a business leadership program that worked with teenagers. He had an image, and people with images. They're terrified of the truth. That night, Lily had a nightmare. She woke up screaming, kicking her blankets off. I rushed in, gathered her up. Uncle Derek is chasing me. She sobbed into my shoulder. He wants to hit me again. I was singing too loud. I rocked her, whispering over and over, he'll never touch you again. I promise, baby mommy's got you. When she finally drifted back to sleep, my decision was crystal clear. My brother thought his money and my parents' protection would keep him safe. He thought the slap would shut us up. He was wrong. The next morning, while Lily colored at Tara's kitchen table, I drafted 3 emails. I attached the edited recording just enough to tell the story without dragging Lily through the mud. One went to the board of directors at Meridian Financial. One to the Children's Future Foundation, where Derek sat on the board. One to the Westlake Business Leaders Mentorship Program. I kept it simple, factual. As someone with a young daughter and deep concern for the welfare of children, I believe you should be aware of Mr. Derek Thompson's recent behavior toward my 6-year-old. Attached is an audio clip documenting an incident that took place at a family gathering. I respectfully ask for confidentiality to protect my child's privacy. Tara stood behind me as I hovered over the send button. Are you sure? I didn't hesitate. I clicked send. If Derek wanted a family legacy on tape, he was about to get one, just not the kind that goes in a polished family documentary. It's funny how you think pressing send will make you feel powerful, like you're the hero in your own movie, hitting that button and blowing up your enemy's perfect life. But the reality, the moment I sent those emails, my hands started shaking. The what-ifs crawled right back in. What if they don't believe me? What if they spin it? What if he gets away with it anyway? Tara put her hand on my shoulder. Hey, you did the right thing. I nodded, but I couldn't stop staring at my phone, waiting for the world to catch up to the truth. I'd just released it didn't take long. First came the panicked text from Derek. What have you done? No, hey Audrey. No, I'm sorry, just that. His next text made me laugh out loud. He actually wrote, you need to fix this. Like I was his PR manager now. Like I owed him the same protection my parents had handed him on a silver platter his whole life. I didn't respond. Not to him, not to my father's messages, you're destroying your brother's career over nothing. Not to my mother's voicemails, that twisted performance of guilt and blame. You've always been so dramatic, Audrey. You need to stop before this goes too far, too far. Derek had hit a 6-year-old in front of an entire room full of witnesses. The only difference was that this time, I had proof. By that evening, my phone was a battlefield of notifications. One from the Meridian Financial HR department. We have received your email and take these matters seriously. Another from the children's charity. We're deeply concerned and will review Mr. Thompson's role immediately. The business mentorship program didn't even reply, they just yanked Derek's name off their website within 24 hours. Paul called me late that night. I stepped out onto Tara's tiny balcony so Lily wouldn't hear. Hey, he said, his voice low, like he was checking for eavesdroppers even at his house. They know. Yeah, I figured. Your dad's been calling everyone, trying to get ahead of it. Derek's losing his mind. He threatened to sue me for leaking the audio. You didn't leak it, I said. I did. There was a long pause. I could hear Paul exhale smoke. I pictured him with a cheap cigar in his garage, The only place my Aunt Linda let him do it. You know they'll spin it, right? Call you crazy, unstable. They're going to say you manipulated it. You prepared for that. I looked through the dark window behind me, at Lily asleep on Tara's couch, Bunny tucked under her arm, face turned toward the wall. The red mark had faded, but the hurt hadn't. Let them spin it, I said. I'm done playing nice. The next few days were a blur. Lily had her first session with Dr. Garner, the child psychologist Dr. Winters recommended. Dr. Garner was warm and gentle, the kind of grown-up I wish I'd had when I was 6. Lily clung to my hand the whole time. She's showing clear signs of acute stress response, Dr. Garner said after their session. Nightmares, clinginess, hesitation around male authority figures. These are normal reactions. But they need to be addressed early. We'll work on coping strategies. Will she be okay? I asked. Dr. Garner's smile was kind, but honest. Children are resilient. But she follow your lead, Audrey. Your strength is her foundation right now. When we left, Lily squeezed my hand and said, Mommy, I sang for Dr. Garner. She liked it. It broke my heart and mended it at the same time. Meanwhile, the Thompson family group text, yes, they actually have one, was blowing up. My mother posted a paragraph-long rant about loyalty and family image. My father tried to dictate an official version of events. It was a misunderstanding. Derek didn't really hit her. It was a light tap. You're humiliating us. Derek, in true Derek fashion, alternated between rage and victimhood. You'll regret this. You've always been jealous. Look what you're doing to Mom and Dad. Look what I was doing. They really had no clue how to take responsibility for anything, but I did. I called my lawyer friend Lisa again. I don't want a lawsuit, I told her, but if they try to spin this, I want to be ready. Lisa didn't even hesitate. Send me everything, texts, emails, the audio, and keep copies. If they threaten you, we're ready to go to court. You don't need money, you need the truth. And the truth was spreading. I didn't post the audio online. This wasn't about public shaming. It was about putting it in the right hands. People who would hold Derek accountable. People who cared more about children's safety than protecting the family brand. And once it was out there, the control my parents thought they had over me slipped through their fingers like sand. 3 days after I sent the emails, Tara and I were sitting at her kitchen table, the same table where I'd first heard that recording play back like a horror movie. My phone buzzed with a new email from Meridian Financial. After a review of the attached evidence, we are placing Mr. Thompson on administrative leave pending a formal investigation. Translation, they believed me. Or at least they couldn't risk ignoring it. I read the email twice. Then I read it again. Tara put her hand over mine. You did it. No, I said, staring at the words. He did it. I just stopped him from burying it. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't about getting even. It was about the simple, radical truth that what they did was wrong. And no kid, not mine, not anyone else's, deserved to be made small and silent to protect the family image. Upstairs, I could hear Lily singing in the bathtub. Her voice carrying down the hallway, bright and fearless again. It wasn't loud. It wasn't perfect. It was her. I thought about the cycle my parents had kept alive for so long. About the daughter they tried to break, and the granddaughter they couldn't touch without consequences. I looked at Tara and said the words out loud, just to taste them. It ends with me. A week passed, then 2. In that time, my brother's perfect world started to unravel like a cheap sweater. Meridian Financial moved faster than I thought they would. I guess when you handle millions of dollars in other people's money, you can't afford the PR nightmare of executive slapschild, calls it discipline. They placed Derek on administrative leave while they investigated. But I knew it was a formality. The audio spoke for itself. Then the Children's Charity Board dropped him entirely. They sent a short, polite statement thanking Derek for his years of service but citing their commitment to child safety and welfare. Boom, gone. The business mentorship program scrubbed his bio from their website. No big speech, no drama. Just vanished. Meanwhile, my phone turned into a grenade every time it buzzed. Derek's messages got more frantic by the day. First, he raged. You ruined me, Audrey. I'm your brother. Then he tried to play the guilt card. Think of Mom and Dad. You're tearing the family apart. And when that didn't work, the threats came. You'll regret this. I'll sue you for defamation. But you can't sue someone for telling the truth, especially when there's a crystal clear recording of your own words. I ignored him, blocked his number. But he still got through. He called my job. I found out when my supervisor, Grace, pulled me aside at the end of the day. "Hey Audrey, I got a weird call this afternoon," she said. "Guy claiming to be your brother, asking about your performance reviews. He wanted your address." My stomach dropped. "What did you say?" I told him nothing. Then I told him to lose this number. Grace squeezed my arm. "Whatever's going on, your job's safe. Don't let him scare you." I wanted to hug her. In that moment, I realized something. For the first time in my life, I had people on my side. People who didn't care who my family was, how much money they had, or how they looked to the outside world. People who just cared about right and wrong. It wasn't just Grace. Parents from Lily's school started reaching out. Friends I hadn't heard from in years sent messages of support. Some shared their own stories, moments when they were that kid at the family table. Too loud, too much, punished for having a voice. It made me feel less alone. Then one morning, Natalie called me, Derek's wife, the woman who had always smiled at me with that careful, distant politeness. Her voice on the phone was shaky. "Can we meet?" she asked. "Somewhere private." I agreed. We met at a little coffee shop halfway between our neighborhoods. I spotted her through the window before I even walked in, sitting at a corner table, staring into her untouched latte. Her wedding ring still on her finger but twisted backward. When I sat down, she looked up at me. Her eyes were puffy, her mascara smudged. "Paul played me the recording," she said quietly. "He played it for Linda. And Linda called me." I didn't say anything. I just waited. I knew Derek had a temper, she continued, her hands trembling around her cup. "He's never hit me, but he's thrown things. He's punched walls. And now, hearing him talk to Lily, calling her useless, saying she needed shame, I realized. I've heard that tone before. I just didn't want to see it. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. "I'm so sorry, Natalie," she sniffed. "Don't be. You did what you had to do. And I think I needed to see it, too." "What will you do?" I asked. She pulled her hand back, twisting her wedding band around and around. I told him I'm staying with my sister for a while. He begged, of course, said he'd get help, that he didn't mean it. She let out a small, bitter laugh. "He always doesn't mean it, but he does it anyway." She paused. "Thank you for protecting Lily, and for showing me the truth." We sat there a while longer, two women bound by the same broken man. When we hugged goodbye, I felt lighter somehow, like the truth was cutting through more than just my corner of the family. Back at Tara's, Lily was curled up on the couch, watching cartoons with a bowl of cereal almost bigger than her head. She looked up at me with her sweet gap-toothed grin. "Mommy, can I go to Aunt Tara's work with her next week? She said they have coloring books." I ruffled her hair. "Sure, baby, whatever you want." And in that moment, I knew no matter what Derek tried to do next, no matter how my parents spun it, Lily was going to be okay, because this time, the cycle stopped with me. I wasn't the same scared kid they could silence. I was the mother who would burn every bridge if it meant my daughter got to keep her voice. And the thing they didn't count on. I wasn't alone anymore. The days after that were strangely calm, at least on the surface. Derek's desperate messages slowed down, but the silence felt loaded, like the hush before a storm. My parents, though, they ramped up their efforts like they'd been waiting for a chance to prove how loyal they were to their golden boy. It started with voicemails. My mother's voice, brittle with forced sweetness. "Audrey, please call us. This has gone on long enough. You're tearing the family apart." Then my father, cold and direct. "This is your fault. You've embarrassed us. This will ruin your brother's career. Do you understand that?" They never once said, "I'm sorry Lily got hurt." They never said Derek was wrong. In their world, the only sin was talking about it, and I had committed the ultimate betrayal, telling the truth. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on Lily and on the tiny pieces of our new normal I was stitching together. Tara's apartment became our little safe haven. Lily and I shared her guest room, mismatched blankets, a squeaky ceiling fan, and more love than my parents' entire mansion had ever held. Each night, I'd find Lily humming to herself, her bunny tucked under her chin, her voice still shaky but brave. Every time I heard her sing, I felt my resolve harden. This was what I was fighting for, not to punish Derek. Not for revenge, but for this small, beautiful child to grow up believing that her voice was never too loud. Then came the call from my grandmother, Martha, the family matriarch. 87 years old and sharper than a tack. The only one who'd ever shown me anything like real protection as a child. She called on a Wednesday evening. I was folding laundry on Tara's couch when my phone buzzed. "Hello," I answered, bracing myself. Her voice was softer than I expected. "Audrey dear, I think it's time we talked." I sank down into the couch. "I'm not sure there's anything left to say." "There's always something left to say." She paused, her breath raspy. "Your father and mother are telling everyone that you've blown this out of proportion. That Derek didn't really hit Lily." My stomach twisted. "Of course they are. Well, I'm old, but I'm not stupid," she snapped. "I've seen that boy's temper. And I've seen how your father lets him get away with murder. I want you to come to my house this Sunday. Bring the recording. Bring the truth." For a second, I didn't know what to say. This was the woman who'd stood by silently when my father used that same discipline on me. But something in her voice told me this time was different. "Okay," I said. "But Lily's not coming. She's not sitting through that circus." "Good grandma," Martha said. "This is grown-up business now." When Sunday came, Tara offered to watch Lily. I kissed my daughter on her forehead as she hummed to herself, coloring at Tara's table. "I'll be back soon," I promised. "Be good for Auntie Tara." Tara squeezed my hand. "Don't let them spin it this time." My grandmother's Victorian house was like stepping back in time, all antique furniture and heavy curtains that smelled like old books and rosewater. I'd spent so many summer days there as a kid, hiding in the attic with my journals, scribbling dreams of running away. Now I was back, not as a child who needed to hide, but as a mother who had proof. When I walked into the sitting room, they were all there. My father in his stiff suit, my mother perched on the edge of the couch, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, Derek, sitting by the window, looking like a man who'd spent too many nights awake, rumpled, anxious, that smug confidence replaced by a kind of simmering resentment. Natalie was there too, sitting apart from him, her eyes downcast, but her spine straight. Paul and Aunt Linda sat together, arms crossed, their expressions stony-dot, and then Grandma Martha leaning on her cane, eyes sharp as ever. She didn't waste any time. "Sit," she said. "Play it." I took a breath, plugged the USB into her old laptop, and pressed play. The slap. The echo of Lily's gasp. Derek's cruel words like mother, like daughter, both useless. My father's cold approval, she needed to learn shame. My mother's laughter, like a nail in a coffin. When it ended, the room felt like it was holding its breath. Derek opened his mouth, probably to spin it, but my grandmother beat him to it. "You struck a child," she said, her voice trembling with age but iron strong. "A child, Derek. And you laughed," she added, turning to my parents. "You both laughed." My mother shook her head, still clinging to her story. "Mother, you don't understand. Audrey always makes everything sound worse than it is." Grandma slammed her cane on the floor so hard the dog in the hallway barked. "Enough. I've listened to this family make excuses for him my whole life. Howard," she turned to my father, who actually flinched. "I let you become this kind of father. I didn't stop you when you learned that cruelty from your own. I thought you'd break the cycle. You didn't." She looked at me, not with pity, but with something like regret. "And you, Audrey, you broke it." A lump rose in my throat. For the first time in my life, I saw my father look away like a boy caught lying. Derek shifted in his seat. Voice small but still venomous. "So what now? Do you want me to stand on a street corner wearing a sign that says I'm a monster?" Grandma shook her head. "I want you to learn what shame really feels like." And I realized in that moment, I didn't need an apology. Not anymore. I didn't need them to see my worth. Because they didn't get to decide it. They never did. For a second, nobody said a word. The weight of it all, decades of excuses, secrets, slaps hidden behind polite smiles, hung in that dusty old living room like a storm cloud that finally cracked open. My father sat with his hands folded, staring at the rug like he could sink into it. My mother looked at me like I was a stranger, the daughter she'd spent her whole life shaping into something small, quiet, easy to control. Now here I was, sitting across from them with proof they couldn't erase, and the spine to say enough. Derek crossed his arms, trying to rebuild that smug mask. "So what's your plan, Audrey? You want to ruin my career forever? You want me to go to jail? You want money? Is that it?" I laughed, short, sharp, humorless. "Money, I don't want a penny from you. I want you to understand that what you did has consequences. That you can't slap a child for singing and call it discipline. My mother's voice cracked. It was just one mistake, Audrey. He's your brother. Was it one mistake when he shoved Jennifer's son at the pool last year? That voice came from the corner. My cousin Jennifer, who'd shown up late and now stood there with her arms crossed. Derek's head snapped toward her. That was different, he shot back. No, it wasn't, Jennifer said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You twisted a 12-year-old's arm because he splashed you. And we all stayed quiet because we knew what would happen if we didn't. Aunt Linda's voice was next, trembling but firm. And what about Paul's girls? You threatened to spank them at the Christmas party for being too loud. They're not even your kids, Derek. You think you can discipline everyone else's children like you own them. Paul's jaw tightened. I didn't know about that, he said quietly. If I had stopped, Derek exploded, standing so fast the old coffee table rattled. Everyone loves to pile on now, huh? This is my family. You all benefit from my success. The money, the status, the opportunities, your money. My grandmother snapped. We survived before your precious deals, Derek, and we'll survive after you're gone. You think you hold us all together, but all you do is poison every room you walk into. For the first time, Derek didn't have a comeback. He just stood there, chest heaving, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Natalie, who'd been silent the whole time, finally spoke up. Her voice was soft but clear. I'm leaving him, she said, and you could have heard a pin drop. Derek turned to her, eyes wide. What? I'm leaving you, Natalie repeated. I stayed too long because I believed you'd never cross a line you couldn't uncross. Now I know better. You can't be serious. I am. She cut in. I'm moving in with my sister until I get my own place. I've already told my parents. We're done. My mother gasped like she'd been slapped. Natalie, this is a family matter? No, Eleanor, Natalie said, her voice steady. This is my life. And I won't spend another year wondering when he'll turn that temper on me. The silence that followed was thick, but it didn't feel heavy on my shoulders this time. It felt like air clearing. Like rot being cut away so something new could grow. I looked around the room and saw it. The shift, some of my cousins nodding, Aunt Linda squeezing Paul's hand. Even my father, who wouldn't meet my eyes. Looking like a man who'd finally realized his golden boy wasn't untouchable. My grandmother leaned back in her chair. I can't fix what I let happen to this family. I wish I could. But Audrey, you did something I didn't have the courage to do. You protected your child. You told the truth. And I am so damn proud of you for that. I swallowed the lump in my throat. For years, I'd dreamed of my parents saying those words. Never thought they'd come from my grandmother, the woman who'd watched from the sidelines my whole life. But they did, and they were enough. I stood, my knees shaky, but strong under me. We're leaving. Lily and I, we're done with this cycle. We're not staying in rooms where people excuse cruelty. My mother opened her mouth, probably to beg. Probably to guilt me, but I cut her off. Mom, until you can admit what happened and put Lily first instead of Derek, we have nothing to talk about. I turned to Derek one last time. He looked like a man who'd just realized his kingdom had turned to sand. You wanted me small my whole life, I said, and guess what? I'm not small anymore. Then I walked out. Out of that heavy old house. Out of that broken pattern. And into the cold, clean air that felt like freedom for the first time in my life. When I stepped outside, the afternoon sun hit my face like a blessing. For a moment, I just stood there on my grandmother's porch, that porch where I'd once sat as a kid. Knees skinned from running barefoot through the yard, dreaming of what it would feel like to belong somewhere safe. I guess, in some way, I found that safe place. Not in that house, not in the family name, or the lake house, or any of the things my parents called legacy. I found it in Lily's laugh. In the way she sings like no one can tell her to be quiet. In Tara's tiny kitchen, warm with mismatched mugs and real loyalty. In my own voice, steady and certain in a way I didn't know was possible. By the time I got back to Tara's, Lily was sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, surrounded by coloring books and snacks. She looked up when she heard the door. Mommy, she squealed, running to me. Her cheek was healing, just a faint shadow now, but I could still see it when the light caught it right. A reminder, and strangely, a promise as she wrapped her arms around my waist and tilted her head back. Did you talk to Grandma Martha? I did, baby, I said, smoothing her hair back. We talked about everything. Is Uncle Derek still mad? She asked, her voice so innocent it stung. Probably, I said, and I actually smiled. But that's not our problem anymore. Tara came in from the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea and a plate of cookies for Lily. "How'd it go?" she asked. "It went," I said, sinking onto the couch. I felt like I'd run a marathon, but one where the finish line meant something this time. They know. They can't deny it now. Natalie's leaving him. The family's splitting in half. Tara didn't look surprised. Sometimes that's what happens when you shine a light on a rotting room. Some people run from it. Some people see what they've been living with and finally leave. I thought about that, about the relatives who'd stayed silent for years. Then found their courage when it was too late for me but not too late for Lily. And maybe that was enough. That night, I sat on the edge of Lily's bed, or, more accurately, Tara's guest bed that Lily had claimed as her princess castle. She was already half asleep, Bunny tucked under her chin. "Mommy," she murmured. "Yeah, baby, did I do something bad? Is that why Uncle Derek?" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I felt my throat tighten. I brushed her hair back, kissed her forehead. "No, Lily, you didn't do anything bad. You were singing. You were happy, and you were perfect exactly the way you are." Her eyelids fluttered. "So I can sing again. Loud if I want." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yes, baby. As loud as you want, always." She drifted off, her breath slow and steady. I sat there a while longer, listening to the soft rise and fall of her breathing. I thought about that house, those walls that had never protected me, and I thought about how, in one weekend, they'd taught me the most important thing I'd ever learn, that sometimes protecting your child means walking away from people you once thought you couldn't live without. I didn't know exactly what would come next. The emails and gossip would keep flying around, I was sure. My parents would twist the story every way they could to protect Derek. Maybe they'd cut me off financially for good, fine by me. I'd rather struggle alone than sell my soul for their hush money ever again. What I did know was this: I had the proof. I had the truth. And I had a daughter who would never have to wonder if she was too much for this world. A few days later, Grace, my boss, called me into her office. I braced myself for bad news. Instead, she closed the door and handed me a file. "I've seen how you handled this," she said. "How you've protected your kid, held your ground, stayed calm when your brother tried to mess with your job. That's leadership, Audrey. We're expanding. There's a new team lead position coming up, and I want you to take it." I just stared at her. "You're serious?" Grace smiled. "Dead serious. And by the way, you're protected here. Anyone tries to mess with you, they can go through me." I walked back to my desk that day with my head held higher than it had ever been at that job. Not because of the title, but because I knew that every step forward was mine alone. No hush money strings, no conditions. By the end of the week, Derek was officially removed from the Children's Charity Board. Meridian Financial announced he'd been reassigned, their polite way of saying he'd never sit in a VP chair again. Natalie filed for separation and moved in with her sister. Some of my cousins, the ones who'd stayed silent for too long, finally called to say they were sorry, that they'd seen, that they'd been too afraid to speak. I told them I didn't need an apology for me, but maybe next time, speak up, sooner, for the next kid. For the next Lily. One night, after a long day of working and momming, and not feeling like I was drowning, I sat on Tara's porch with a glass of cheap wine. She came out and sat beside me, bumping my shoulder. "You know you can stay here as long as you need," she said. "I know," I said, looking up at the stars. "But I think we're ready to go home." She raised her eyebrows. "Really, back to that apartment?" "Yeah," I said, feeling a quiet certainty bloom in my chest. "It's not much, but it's ours. And it's safe now, because I know how to keep it that way." I looked through the window where Lily was dancing around the living room, singing her heart out to a cartoon song, her voice echoing off the walls, no one telling her to be quiet. In that moment, I knew, they didn't break me, and they sure as hell weren't going to break her. A few weeks later, Lily and I moved back into our apartment. It was small, it always had been, but when I unlocked that squeaky front door with its chipped paint, it didn't feel like coming back to an old struggle. It felt like walking into a place we owned. Not because we'd paid it off or because it was fancy, but because no one else's power or money controlled what happened inside these walls. I remember setting down our bags and watching Lily race from room to room, reuniting with her dolls and the blanket fort she'd half left behind. She twirled in the living room, belting out her latest favorite song at the top of her lungs. And this time, I didn't hush her. I didn't flinch, waiting for someone to tell her she was too loud, too much, too everything. I just let her sing. A couple days after we settled back in, I got a call I didn't expect. It was my grandmother, Martha, the one person in that whole mess who'd looked me in the eye and said she was proud. Her voice on the line was thin but clear. "Do you have time for tea this week, Audrey?" I almost said no. Part of me wanted to cut every last branch off that family tree and salt the soil, but another part of me, the part that still held on to the possibility that some things could be salvaged, said yes. We sat on her wraparound porch, the same place I'd watched fireflies as a kid. She poured tea the old-fashioned way, tiny china cups with saucers she'd had since before I was born. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I want you to know," she said, stirring her cup slowly, "that you did right by your girl." I looked down into my tea, steam curling between us. It shouldn't have taken a recording to make people believe me. She let out a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 100 family secrets. "No, it shouldn't have. I stayed silent too many times with your father. I told myself that was how men were raised, how discipline made boys strong." She paused, her gaze drifting to the garden beyond the porch. "I see now it just made them hard. And it taught them that power excuses everything." Her words cracked something open in me, not forgiveness. Not yet, but an understanding that sometimes even the people who failed you see their mistakes too late. "Your parents won't change overnight," she said, "but you're changing things. I see it. I don't know if I'm ready to see them again," I said honestly. "I don't want them near Lily until they understand she's not theirs to shame." Grandma Martha gave me a nod that was somehow both sad and approving. "Then don't. Not until you feel they've earned it. You decide the terms now." When I left her house that day, I didn't feel like the scapegoat anymore. I felt like a mother with a spine made of steel, and a grandmother who in her own flawed way was rooting for me. Meanwhile, Derek tried to claw back what little control he had left. He called, texted, even showed up at my work parking lot once, leaning against his car like the big shot he used to be, wearing sunglasses to hide the bags under his eyes. "Look," he said, hands spread like I was a business deal he could still negotiate. "I'm going to counseling." "Okay, Natalie's moved out, and my lawyer says the charity might take me back in a year if I keep my head down. But I need you to tell people you blew this out of proportion." I just stared at him, standing there in his expensive shoes and cheap apologies. The same brother who had laughed when I was pushed down the stairs at 15, who had called my daughter a brat for daring to sing, who had expected me to shut up and keep the family's image shiny. "No," I said, "one word, simple as that. No more lying for you." He looked at me like he'd never really seen me before. "I did one thing wrong. One slap, Audrey. You've ruined my life." I shook my head. "No. You ruined your life when you thought you could control people with fear. When you thought Lily was just a smaller version of me, someone you could shut up." For the first time, I saw something in his eyes, not regret, not really, but fear. Fear that the mask he'd always worn, the one that made him untouchable, was gone for good. He didn't push. He didn't threaten. He just walked back to his car, shoulders hunched like a man half his age. And that was the last time I saw my brother face to face. Later that week, I got an email from the children's charity's new director, a kind woman named Rachel, who wanted me to know they'd put new policies in place to protect kids, including background checks for anyone working directly with children. She thanked me for having the courage to speak up. I stared at that email for a long time, letting the words sink in. It didn't erase what happened to Lily, but it meant no other kid would sit at that same table and wonder if their laughter was too much. And that was enough for now. That weekend, Lily asked if she could have a few friends over. Just juice boxes, coloring books, and an endless loop of the same cartoon soundtrack she loved. I watched her dance around our living room, her little friends giggling, nobody telling her to hush. And I realized that for the first time in my life, our home, this tiny two-bedroom apartment, with its squeaky floors and secondhand couch, was safer than any mansion my parents had ever owned. The weeks kept rolling by, and with every sunrise, the fear that used to knot my stomach loosened its grip. Some days, I woke up and still heard my father's voice in my head. "Audrey, you're overreacting." Some days, I wondered if Derek was telling people his version of the story, painting me as unstable, vindictive, impossible. But then I'd hear Lily singing in the next room, off-key loud, fearless, and it drowned out every ghost they'd left behind. Tara and I sat at my kitchen table one night after Lily had gone to bed. We were sorting through bills, old ones I used to panic over, new ones that felt more manageable now that my promotion had come through. I was doing it on my own. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but honestly, for once. You know, Tara said, breaking the comfortable quiet, your parents might never get it. They might never say sorry. I didn't even look up from the pile of papers. I don't need an apology anymore. She raised an eyebrow. Really, I thought. About it. Really thought about it. Okay, maybe I wanted one. For a long time, but I don't want their version of sorry. The kind where they pat my head and say they forgive me for making a fuss. I'd rather have nothing. Tara clinked her mug. Against mine. To nothing. Then, and to everything you've built instead. A few days later, my phone buzzed with an email from Natalie, Derek's soon-to-be ex-wife. She'd filed for divorce. She didn't write much. Just thank you. I see it all clearly now. And I'm not looking back. I found out through Paul. Bless him, he'd become my reluctant family mole, that Derek had been demoted permanently. He was stuck in a corner office, handling accounts nobody wanted, buried under a new manager who didn't worship him the way Dad did. My father, apparently, still stomped around, telling everyone that family should stay loyal, while my mother cycled between silent treatment and sending me awkward text messages like "I miss you. Can we have dinner?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Maybe, not ever. Because Lily was healing, and that was my priority. Dr. Garner, her child therapist, was a godsend. She gave Lily tools to talk about the nightmares when they came. She helped her understand that sometimes grown-ups do bad things, not because kids are bad, but because grown-ups are broken. She helped me, too, in ways I didn't expect. One day after a session, Dr. Garner pulled me aside. You know, she said, a lot of parents bring their kids to therapy and then undo the work at home. You've done the opposite. Lily knows she's safe because you're safe for her. It felt like a blessing and a challenge all in one. And it made me promise myself every single day that I'd keep doing the work. I'd protect that little voice, even when it cracked. Especially when it cracked. One Sunday, 6 months after the lake house incident, Lily and I went to the park. It was nothing fancy, the same city park I'd taken her to 100 times. Where the swing chains squeaked and the ducks fought over breadcrumbs. But it felt different now. Lighter. Like the sky was bigger without the weight of my family's secrets pressing it down. Lily climbed onto the small stage they used for summer concerts and yelled, "Mommy, watch." I stood there in the grass, arms crossed, sunglasses shading my eyes. "I'm watching, baby." She closed her eyes and belted out her favorite song, the same one she'd been singing that day Derek hit her. But this time, her voice didn't wobble. She didn't look over her shoulder, waiting to be told she was too much. She just sang. A few other parents turned to look, some of them smiling, some whispering to each other. I didn't care. My daughter was loud. My daughter was free. That's all that mattered. When she finished, she jumped off the stage, ran up to me, and threw her arms around my waist. Was I too loud? She asked, half giggling. I knelt so we were eye to eye. Never, Lily. Not for me. That night, I wrote something in my journal, a letter I'll probably never send to my parents, but needed to say out loud. You taught me to be quiet. You taught me that speaking up was shameful, that my voice was an inconvenience. But you forgot that the girl you told to hush would grow up, and when she did, she'd make sure her daughter never feels that same shame. I closed the journal and put it on the shelf. A reminder that my story wasn't about them anymore. It was about Lily. It was about me. It was about the version of family you build when you decide blood is only as good as the love that comes with it. I still don't know what the future holds for my parents and me. Maybe they'll change. Maybe they won't. Maybe we'll sit down in some awkward restaurant someday, and they'll try to explain it away, the way they always have. But this time, I'll be ready. This time, I'll have my voice. And Lily will have hers, loud and clear. The weeks kept rolling by, and with every sunrise, the fear that used to knot my stomach loosened its grip. Some days, I woke up and still heard my father's voice in my head. Audrey, you're overreacting. Some days, I wondered if Derek was telling people his version of the story, painting me as unstable, vindictive, impossible. But then I'd hear Lily singing in the next room, off-key loud, fearless, and it drowned out every ghost they'd left behind. Tara and I sat at my kitchen table one night after Lily had gone to bed. We were sorting through bills, old ones I used to panic over, new ones that felt more manageable now that my promotion had come through. I was doing it on my own. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but honestly, for once. You know, Tara said, breaking the comfortable quiet, your parents might never get it. They might never say sorry. I didn't even look up from the pile of papers. I don't need an apology anymore. She raised an eyebrow. Really, I thought. About it. Really thought about it. Okay, maybe I wanted one. For a long time, but I don't want their version of sorry. The kind where they pat my head and say they forgive me for making a fuss. I'd rather have nothing. Tara clinked her mug. Against mine. To nothing. Then, and to everything you've built instead. A few days later, my phone buzzed with an email from Natalie, Derek's soon-to-be ex-wife. She'd filed for divorce. She didn't write much. Just thank you. I see it all clearly now. And I'm not looking back. I found out through Paul, bless him, he'd become my reluctant family mole, that Derek had been demoted permanently. He was stuck in a corner office, handling accounts nobody wanted, buried under a new manager who didn't worship him the way Dad did. My father, apparently, still stomped around, telling everyone that family should stay loyal, while my mother cycled between silent treatment and sending me awkward text messages like I miss you. Can we have dinner? I didn't answer. Not yet. Maybe, not ever. Because Lily was healing, and that was my priority. Dr. Garner, her child therapist, was a godsend. She gave Lily tools to talk about the nightmares when they came. She helped her understand that sometimes grown-ups do bad things, not because kids are bad, but because grown-ups are broken. She helped me, too, in ways I didn't expect. One day after a session, Dr. Garner pulled me aside. You know, she said, a lot of parents bring their kids to therapy and then undo the work at home. You've done the opposite. Lily knows she's safe because you're safe for her. It felt like a blessing and a challenge all in one. And it made me promise myself every single day that I'd keep doing the work. I'd protect that little voice, even when it cracked. Especially when it cracked. One Sunday, 6 months after the lake house incident, Lily and I went to the park. It was nothing fancy, the same city park I'd taken her to 100 times. Where the swing chains squeaked and the ducks fought over breadcrumbs. But it felt different now. Lighter. Like the sky was bigger without the weight of my family's secrets pressing it down. Lily climbed onto the small stage they used for summer concerts and yelled, "Mommy, watch." I stood there in the grass, arms crossed, sunglasses shading my eyes. "I'm watching, baby." She closed her eyes and belted out her favorite song, the same one she'd been singing that day Derek hit her. But this time, her voice didn't wobble. She didn't look over her shoulder, waiting to be told she was too much. She just sang. A few other parents turned to look, some of them smiling, some whispering to each other. I didn't care. My daughter was loud. My daughter was free. That's all that mattered. When she finished, she jumped off the stage, ran up to me, and threw her arms around my waist. Was I too loud? She asked, half giggling. I knelt so we were eye to eye. Never, Lily. Not for me. That night, I wrote something in my journal, a letter I'll probably never send to my parents, but needed to say out loud. You taught me to be quiet. You taught me that speaking up was shameful, that my voice was an inconvenience. But you forgot that the girl you told to hush would grow up, and when she did, she'd make sure her daughter never feels that same shame. I closed the journal and put it on the shelf. A reminder that my story wasn't about them anymore. It was about Lily. It was about me. It was about the version of family you build when you decide blood is only as good as the love that comes with it. I still don't know what the future holds for my parents and me. Maybe they'll change. Maybe they won't. Maybe we'll sit down in some awkward restaurant someday, and they'll try to explain it away, the way they always have. But this time, I'll be ready. This time, I'll have my voice. And Lily will have hers, loud and clear. Summer drifted into fall, and our little apartment filled up with signs that life was moving forward. Lily's drawings covered the fridge, colorful stick figures of her and me, always holding hands under big, bright suns. There was a tiny certificate pinned up to Lily Thompson, Best Singing Smile from her community center choir. I couldn't look at it without my chest tightening in that way only a mom's pride can do. Some nights, I'd stand in the hallway, listening to her hum to herself as she fell asleep. No fear. No shame. Just her sweet, brave voice echoing against the walls. And every time, I'd whisper the same thing. Never let anyone silence you. Not even me. Word about Derek faded like any scandal does. My father's business buddies probably shook their heads and called it a family spat. My mother, if the occasional rumor was true, Still hosted dinners where she acted like I'd made it all up, a fragile single mother desperate for attention. I used to fantasize about confronting her one last time, about forcing her to say the words "I'm sorry," but with every month that passed, I realized I didn't need her to. She could keep her silence. I'd broken mine, and I hadn't done it alone. That was the biggest lesson, maybe the most important one of all. For so long, I'd believed survival meant doing everything myself. Keep your head down. Don't ask for help. Don't make waves. But the night I left that lake house, Lily in my arms, and my heart in my throat, I learned something they never wanted me to know. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is ask for help. And accept it when it comes. Tara reminded me of that, every day. She's still dropped by unannounced with takeout and her favorite trashy gossip magazines. She never called me a hero. She just called me Audrey. And that was enough. Paul texted now and then 2 quick check-ins to see how Lily was doing. He and Linda had their own mess to untangle. But he made it clear I wasn't alone in telling the truth. Natalie sent me updates about her new apartment, her first solo vacation, her plans to go back to school. She signed every message the same way: "It's never too late to choose yourself." I pinned her last email above my desk at home so I'd see it every morning while I worked. And work, that was growing too. The new team lead role came with longer hours, bigger challenges, and more responsibility than I'd ever imagined I could handle. Some nights, I stayed up late with my laptop open while Lily slept nearby. And I'd think, they said you'd never amount to anything. Look at you now. One Saturday morning, Lily and I went back to the lake, not that lake house, obviously, but a small public park by the water that we'd always loved. She ran straight to the edge, shoes abandoned on the sand, toes sinking in. I followed behind her, a blanket and our old battered cooler in tow. She twirled in the shallows, hair wild, giggling so loudly that a family nearby turned to look. For a second, my old reflex kicked in, the urge to hush her, to apologize for her being too much. But I didn't. I let her laugh echo across the water. She plopped down on the blanket next to me, dripping and breathless. "Mommy, you know what I want to be when I grow up." "What, baby?" "A singer," she declared. "And a teacher, and maybe a mom, too. But mostly a singer so people can't tell me to be quiet." I grinned, so wide it made my cheeks ache. "Sounds perfect." She leaned her head on my arm. "Do you think I'll be good at it?" I looked down at her. "My wild, beautiful, stubborn girl. I think you already are." She thought about that for a second, then burst out laughing. "You're the best, Mommy." I wanted to tell her all the things I'd learned too late, that sometimes the people who say they love you will break you down piece by piece. That you don't owe anyone your silence just because they share your blood. That forgiveness is good, but boundaries are better. Instead, I just pulled her close and said the only thing that mattered. "And you, Lily, are the best thing I've ever done." A few weeks later, Lily's school asked me to come in for a parent conference. The old me, the me from a year ago, would have walked into that classroom with my shoulders hunched, bracing for criticism, waiting to be told all the ways I was failing as a mother. But this version of me, I walked in with my head up, hand in Lily's tiny hand, ready for whatever they had to say. Her teacher, Ms. Joanna, sat across from me with a warm smile. She showed me Lily's latest project, a colorful poster with glitter and construction paper flowers. Big letters at the top read, "My voice matters." I felt my throat tighten just looking at it. "Lily is doing so well," Ms. Joanna said. "She's so creative, so brave. She stands up for herself, and for other kids too." I laughed softly. "Yeah, she's good at that." Ms. Joanna lowered her voice. "She told me you're writing a book one day. About her story. About your story. I hope you do." "Maybe I will," I thought as I buckled Lily into her booster seat that afternoon. "Maybe one day I'll put this all down on paper. The family that wanted to keep us quiet, the slap that woke me up, the little girl who refused to be silenced. Maybe our story will help another mother stand up and say no more when her own family says hush." One night, Lily and I sat on our couch, eating popcorn straight from the bowl, our feet tangled up under a blanket that smelled like home. She looked up at me with those bright blue eyes, so different from mine but so much stronger. "Mommy, do you think people can change?" she asked, out of nowhere, her voice curious, not sad. I thought about that. About my parents, stuck in their pride. About Derek, still blaming everyone but himself. About Natalie, finally free. About me, the girl who'd once swallowed every insult, every slap, every dismissal like they were the air she breathed. Yeah, baby, I said. I think people can change. But only if they want to, and only if they try really, really hard. She nodded like that made perfect sense. Then she said, I'm glad you changed. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled the popcorn. Me too. 6 months became a year. The recording stayed locked away on a flash drive in my desk. My quiet reminder that the truth is stronger than any secret. Paul kept in touch, a quiet supporter in the shadows. Natalie sent me photos of her new puppy and the hiking trails she'd finally had time to explore. Tara stayed my anchor, dropping by with cupcakes when the days got heavy, and Lily, she sang. She sang in the shower, in the car, in the grocery store aisles. Sometimes she sang so loud the neighbors knocked on our door, not to complain, but to tell me how beautiful it was to hear. It was the sound of a cycle breaking. The sound of a mother's promise kept. I don't know what will happen with my parents in the years ahead. Maybe they'll figure out what they did. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll grow old and still tell their version of the story. At holiday tables we'll never sit at again. And that's okay, because I didn't save them, I saved her. And in doing that, I saved myself too. So if you're watching this and you've ever been told you're too loud, too much, too anything, I hope you remember Lily's voice. I hope you remember mine. And I hope you remember this. Your voice deserves to echo. Your truth deserves to be heard. And sometimes, the bravest thing you'll ever do is open your mouth and say, no more. I'm Audrey. I'm Lily's mom. And we're louder than ever.